DLT is about bringing as much as possible of the market into shared ledger. I mean, it is kind of illusionary to think about one big ledger that everyone will be on, but like, let's say, a consolidated interoperable set of ledgers. So that should be the goal. And if you now consider central bank money as some sort of an asset, then you need like a common crystallization point where this asset provided by central bank can meet with all the other assets provided by the market. Yeah, and so the big question will be, especially in the Appia context, is what is this crystallization point?
Welcome to Inside Digital Assets, the podcast about the future of capital markets, tokenization, digital assets, and the technologies that power them. Welcome to a new episode of our podcast Inside Digital Assets. It's an amazing honor to have here today Ivica Aračić, the CTO of SWIAT. We are going to talk about SWIAT. We're going to talk about regulated layer 1 and many more topics of interest around the DLT space. So a great honor to have you here, Ivica.
Thank you for the invitation.
So you have a background at the intersection of financial markets, of technology. So you are predestined to be in that space of DLT where we have a lot of traction in the financial services space. Can you elaborate a bit on how you ended up here? Like, what is your journey until you got here to that role?
Yeah, well, so I think I need to go a couple of years back into my past. Yeah, I started working at Deka Bank and in the financial industry in general in 2011. And I was in the area of enterprise application integration. So basically how all the different applications that exist in the bank, how they talk to each other and how they exchange data. And here the parallel to blockchain already starts, yeah, how different systems interact. And around 2016, so let's say with the rise of Ethereum and also with the rise of the interest in DLT in the financial industry, so we started thinking about how we can leverage this for an asset manager like Deka Bank. How can we use blockchain technology? And it was a very interesting area. I always liked to be in innovation. And we kind of started different initiatives within the bank. And then finally, one of these initiatives ended in founding SWIAT in 2022. And I switched from Deka Bank with 4 other colleagues as a part of the founding team. And yeah, so that's how I ended up in SWIAT.
Before we deep dive more into what SWIAT is doing and how you're shaping the digital asset world, can you let us know, like, was there like a moment where you realized what DLT can actually change into this financial infrastructure and that made you decide to actually also shift your career in that area?
Yeah, so what I mean, I have a computer science background, and so as Bitcoin came out, I have to honestly admit that I did not understand the benefits of it. Yeah? So I was thinking, this is some crazy internet money, so who is going actually to use this? And this will never be worth something. So I have to honestly admit this. But with the upcoming of Ethereum, then I started realizing how cool this is. Yeah, you have a machine that is not operated by one single entity, and it is operated in a decentralized way, and still the integrity of this machine, so basically the programs that are executed on it, is maintained. And this, let's say, this small technical property, so to say, opens building platforms which are able to bring end-to-end different stakeholders and also eventually competing entities together on the same network, and ending up in sitting in basically in the same shared system, which is not operated centrally. And then I started thinking and realizing, wow, so this is some sort of socio-technical catalyst that could reshape the way how people collaborate, especially in the financial industry. Yeah.
Now, looking at SWIAT and what you are trying to achieve with SWIAT is really bringing a regulated infrastructure framework for issuing digital assets into the regulated financial market. Can you let us know a bit what your idea behind SWIAT is?
So as we started with SWIAT 2022, so the idea was to collect the puzzle pieces, so be it by creating them ourselves or be it by finding them in the market and putting them together. to bring everything together that is needed for regulated entities to scale the digital asset use cases. And then now, as you can imagine, if you have this IMF asset model in front of you, like with the platform, assets, services, and access, then these puzzle pieces kind of are spread across these different layers. And so, and it is also reflected in our portfolio. So we are infrastructure provider with SWIAT network, permissioned Ethereum blockchain, optimized for regulated industry, which is now transitioning to a regulated layer 1. So more on that later, I guess. And we have a digital asset solutions for tokenization and for settlement. Yeah. So in financial industry, everything revolves around assets. So this is like the first thing that you need to solve to be able to create assets, to be able to transfer them, to be able to settle them also in a more complex way than just having a simple transfer from A to B. So I'm talking about delivery versus delivery or delivery versus payments. And then, of course, you need to provide financial services to be able to offer these assets in a regulated environment, like being registrar, for instance, under German Electronic Security Act. Yeah. And so bringing these puzzle pieces together, so this is our mission, and combining them with other puzzle pieces in the market. Yeah. So that's what SWIAT does. Yeah.
And when we look back a bit, you have been involved in a couple of transactions, not only pilot transactions, but also really live transactions. Can you show a bit what you have done so far and what we might also have already achieved as an industry as a whole together with other partners?
Yeah. So maybe in general, yeah, if we look back, yeah, and I mean, I'm now since around a decade in this area, and if I think like 10 years ago, back 10 years ago, then no regulation was existing. So paying with central bank money, so was like you could just dream of it, yeah, or having the possibility to natively issue a financial instrument like a bond or registered share directly on blockchain. So this was simply kind of not existent, yeah. And we moved we did a lot of progress, yeah. So regulation changed, infrastructure matured, technology matured. We are able to issue instruments directly natively. We're also able to on-ramp traditional instruments and kind of give them similar properties to digital assets, so making them faster and cheaper in settlement. But still, we have some things to do, and especially for this year, I would say enabling MTF. Yeah, so where Seturion is also very, let's say, in Germany, would say fleißig to provide this, right? So secondary market is important. Having different payment means, yeah, stable coins are, I would say, ready to be used. Then central bank money will be ready. So if I look at Pontes, so by the end of this year, and it will also go beyond that with Appia. And tokenized deposits is also on a good way. I think still some interpretations need to be kind of clarified, but technically I think they could be introduced. So payment is on the way, secondary market is on the way, and then the last final thing, and I think it will take some time, is that these assets that now are created directly natively on DLT, that they become first-class citizen compared to their traditional counterparts. Yeah? Because it's the same financial industry being on a different technology, but currently it's treated as second-class citizen, especially in regard to eligibility criteria. Also, and the most prominent example is you cannot bring it to ECB and get liquidity for your collateral. Yeah, and once we bring this together, and I think we are on a good way. So everything's being worked on. When we bring this together, then we have completed the puzzle, and then finally the whole thing takes off after 10 to 12 years. Yeah. So it's some.
Yeah, I really like that analogy or that saying of being a first-class citizen, as we're always talking about technology neutrality. So that's where in real life you see whether that's actually being implemented or not. So we still have massive differentiation, whether it's on one technology or the other, which is definitely something that needs to be looked at. Looking back, another time, just quickly, for also that, because I think it's very important to highlight also the transactions you already did, which also involve large finance institutions. Can you tell the listeners a bit what in the transactions you did and also maybe learnings that you had from those.
Yeah, thank you for repeating this one more time. I missed it in my previous explanation. Yeah, so I mean we are in production since 2022 actually, and really starting in 2023. And so currently, so there is 700 million in notional in euro issued on the platform in real value. So not like let's say play money, but in real value. And the most notable transaction that we did is the Siemens bond issuance. So it was 300 million in 2024. And it has been settled in DBP manner, so with central bank money during the Eurosystem exploratory work in 2024. And I mean, for me, I never was in doubt that we can do it. Yeah. So basically, for me, it is kind of since let's say inception of blockchain technology clear that we can profit from this technology and that we can implement it. But still, technology is not like the only part. So a lot of additional parts need to come together. And so this progress that has been made is like so people are understanding, and we have legal and business components also kind of being involved and brought at the same level like technology. And we have now tried different things, and I think everybody's now clear in the perspective of that this can be scaled now. And I think this is the next trophy. So far, the last 10 years was about showing it goes from 0 to 1. Yeah. And now I think everyone is realizing this works. It has been tried in different aspects. And now the next trophy to get is to go from one to many, yeah, and to make it business as usual. And often at panels, so people are asked like, what are we going to talk about in 5 years? Then I always like to answer something like, I hope in 5 years we have no panels like this anymore, because it is so business as usual that nobody's talking about this anymore. So then we are realizing that we are successful with that, what we do.
Yeah, I totally agree there. What do you think in terms of, and we're going to deep dive on regulated layer 1 in a second, but more on a general perspective. So on one side, you have offerings such as an issuance service where institutions can use their offering to tokenize assets. On the other side, there seems to be the need, or there might be the need for a shared single ledger. So really a DLT infrastructure. How do you assess the requirement of having such a shared infrastructure? Maybe also for the listeners to give a bit of background. On one side, we have existing shared infrastructure, such as, for example, public blockchains like Ethereum, Polygon. We also have existing private networks, often also, for example, Canton-based, Hyperledger-based, and so on. In general terms, how important do you assess the requirement of having such a shared ledger, and what is the need of implementing a new one?
Mm-hmm. Having a shared ledger where, let's say, stakeholders can meet and kind of participate in a shared process data model, so as a technical guy would describe it, is kind of essential to the promise of the blockchain technology. And now that you have mentioned public permissionless setting, so I would say this is like the best demonstration of what you can do if you have a new to go on, let's say, on large scale to such platforms in general. So there are specific use cases which work okay, yeah, because the target audience is used to the risk profile existing there, yeah. But I'm talking about generally moving like large portions of the business there. And what holds them back is the universal homework that every regulated entity has, and that is namely risk management and risk assessment. Yeah. And if you look now at public permissionless setting, then you have openness, you have neutrality. It is designed as utility. So if we assume that, let's say, the gas price is a fair price, so to say, for paying for this infrastructure, but it is lacking compliance optimization in the sense of that it is clearly stated who's responsible for what. So there are responsibilities, there is governance, but everything is kind of implicitly grown bottom up, and it is very difficult and not tangible for regulated institutions in the general case. I'm always talking about the general case here. And from this perspective, having a permissioned network is a way to kind of solve this compliance optimization problem, so to say, to make it more tangible for regulated entities. But so far, it suffered from being too restrictive, like not considering also openness and neutrality, and sometimes also not the utility, but rather designing everything as some sort of revenue extraction model, so to say. Yeah? And so what we think is, so like, there are different things here. So the first thing is, all these different constellations that we talk about, they are not dominant in all aspects. So it's always like a trade-off constellation, and you need to see like which model fits best for you. And I think both of these models will have a place in the future and have a place now. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, we also need, with permissioned networks, we need to strike balance between completely wild environment and completely constrained environment where that cannot grow. Yeah? And that's exactly why we decided to build SWIAT network in the first place, which is permissioned Ethereum, but only permissioned as much that a regulated entity can do the risk management framework that everyone has. But on the other side, also open and neutral and very much inspired by public permissionless settings. So not to constrain like innovation and not to constrain, let's say, different actors are providing their services and applications in that network. So that's this balance that we strike between traditional consortial permissioned private networks that we had so far in the last 10 years that did not grow and scale, and public permissionless setting, which is open and neutral, but not compliance optimized. So we're trying to strike this balance and kind of balance out all these four properties: neutrality, openness, utility, and compliance optimization.
I very much see your points, and that's also why at Seturion, where we are open for public as well as private blockchain, so really connecting to both as long as they have traction. So we additionally also very much see the argument potentially on the scalability side. So depending on how much volume you actually want to pull through, that's also something which might be easier, not to say easy, but maybe easier on privately controlled environments, as long as they still also have certain governance functionalities in place. So yeah, I think that's the discussions that we will have over the next few years. And I also strongly believe that there is no right or wrong, but there is really a right infrastructure for the right use case. So there might be dependent on whatever use case might be another infrastructure.
So if you're coming from, let's say, technical background like I do, and if you think like IT architect, then you always think in trade-off constellations. Yeah? There is no like dominant or super silver bullet which kills every problem or every monster. Yeah? So you always need to think in trade-offs. Yeah, like you have these design goals or these requirements, and then this trade-off constellation matches these. Yeah, and then it works. And from this perspective, there's no like super solution which kind of solves all problems at once.
Yeah. So we have teaser now around it. Let's deep dive a bit into that shared network. You have mentioned it, SWIAT network. It is now being transferred into regulated layer 1. Can you give us an introduction into what regulated layer 1 is and how the core of regulated layer 1 is actually opening it up also to others and to the ecosystem?
So I mentioned already these four properties that let's say a shared network that wants to kind of attract a larger number of participants needs to have. Yeah, so it needs to be neutral, it needs to be open, it needs to be designed as utility. Yeah, and people not being in fear of getting lock-in effects and then suddenly like prices increasing to extract revenues out of this platform. Yeah, so it needs to be operated as utility, like for the benefit of all participants, and competition then happens on the layers above, running on this utility, like at applications or services or financial services level. Yeah. And that's exactly as we started with SWIAT. We said, should we build yet another permissioned network? I mean, if there would be another, let's say, choice, I would not have built this. Yeah, but then we were thinking like, there is still a lot of reluctance for regulated entities to go to permissionless settings, and then the question was why. Was it just like misconception in the interpretation, or was there some real reason for this? And then we came finally to explaining it like this universal homework of infrastructure risk management. You cannot just say like because 10 years it worked well, it will continue to work. So you always need to think about who is responsible for what, and what if it fails. Yeah, who will be doing what? Yeah, and this is sometimes very difficult in a permission setting. And so for this reason, we said, okay, let's start to build it. And the governance of it, if you introduce permissioning, you need to be clear on the governance. And the governance was embedded in GmbH, which is a limited in Germany, right? And then we were aware of the fact like a limited is not a credibly neutral governance body, because the shareholders tomorrow they decide to change the terms and conditions, and then suddenly different rules apply, right? But we said, okay, we have enough work to build to set up one legal entity, so let's start with that first, and then with the time transition to something which is more credibly neutral and move the governance there. And that's exactly what happened. So we have created this network. We have created the regulatory framework around this network, which was much more complex than the technology, to be honest. Yeah, I would say by 10 times more complex. We have demonstrated that it works by all, let's say, the real value transactions that we did on that network. And we have taken innovation risks. Yeah. And now finally we came to the point where we said, okay, now we go to the market and say, look, this works. So let's now carve it out of SWIAT GmbH and move it to a legal entity that is more credibly neutral. And we have selected for this European cooperative as the legal entity form. Yeah. And the cooperative is actually a very good legal entity for managing shared goods, for the benefits of its members. Yeah. And that's exactly what here needs to happen. And that's exactly the main part of this transition that is happening right now. Carving out something that works, technology and the governance framework, and moving under a credibly neutral European umbrella with European financial industry as members and participants in the governance of this network. So that's the core idea behind regulated layer 1. Yeah.
And now behind this corporate, there is a range of financial institutions, such as also Seturion, which is a part or going to be a member of it. Is the idea of having an open infrastructure, open for let's say a couple of participants, open for the ecosystem, and doing something together instead of in another silo, is something that resonates very much with us. That's why we have stated early on that we are also involved and looking at it. Can you deep dive a bit on which types of institutions are participating, and is it then closed, or are you still open for others? How does that look like?
So it is. We have now 12, let's say, initiating members, who came together to kind of incorporate this legal entity and to set it up. And the gates are open at any time. Yeah? So you can join now, or you can join later when the legal entity has been set up. Yeah? And the goal is really to be non-discriminatory, to say if you're part of the financial industry, be it a larger bank, be it an asset manager, be it a fintech, then you are free to join. You're free to join, and you're free to participate in the governance. And so there is this is this openness and neutrality part. And another important thing is, to be credibly neutral, you need to kind of clearly separate what is your responsibility. And with regulated layer 1, we said it is responsible for the pure naked infrastructure, so the naked blockchain. So it does not go into the area of assets or into the area of applications. So this is the competition area, so to say, where people can go in competition to each other. And the goal of regulated layer 1 is to provide the neutral ground for the platform itself, which we consider to be not contributing to competitive differentiation. So if you cooperate there, it brings benefit to all, And then there is still enough room to go into competition on top of it at the layer of assets or at the layer of services provided around these assets.
And as financial institutions, do I have to join to actually use it? Or if it's live, could I just also use it only?
They are so basically you can use it without becoming member and participating in the governance. So this is possible. And if you become the member, then of course you are also eligible to use it. And the big benefit is, or the great benefit is, that you can also participate in the governance, and especially the earlier you join, the more you can influence, of course. So
okay.
Exactly.
Now, going back to one topic you mentioned briefly in the beginning is the cash leg. So you have mentioned central bank money, so initiatives like Appia and Pontes. How important are those projects in terms of bringing the ecosystem further and also bringing a cash leg to the ecosystem?
I mean, we talked about all the different puzzle pieces that need to come together. So different players in the market are kind of bringing this together to the table. So SWIAT is providing part of it, Seturion is providing part of it, and then a lot of other participants are also bringing additional puzzle pieces to the table. And central bank money is one important part, because currently we have trades that are settled in central bank money. And if this is not available in the new ecosystem, then it is kind of not at the same level like status quo. And then it's very difficult to compete with status quo if you're not able to provide all these features. And so from this perspective, let's say the same capabilities need also to be available on DLT. And for this reason, Appia and Pontes are very, very important. And the second, or payment legs in general, And second thing is DLT is about bringing as much as possible of the market into shared ledger. I mean, it is kind of illusionary to think about one big ledger that everyone will be on, but like, let's say, a consolidated interoperable set of ledgers. So that should be the goal. And if you now consider central bank money as some sort of an asset, then you need like a common crystallization point where this asset provided by central bank can meet with all the other assets provided by the market. And so the big question will be, especially in the Appia context, is what is this crystallization point? And if we are able to create something which is credibly neutral from the perspective of European financial industry and eventually also the broader industry in general, then that would be a very fruitful ground for these assets to meet. And that's also like what regulated layer 1 is also targeting for, to be this neutral ground under European governance where these different assets can crystallize and meet together and then finally leverage all the benefits of the blockchain technology, as you can observe in the wild in public permissionless settings, but now in a setting that is compatible with regulated entities in general.
Now, when we look a bit ahead and in terms of what's lacking, so we talked about SWIAT as an issuing infrastructure. We talked about the regulated layer 1 as a potential shared ledger. We talked about Seturion being part of regulated layer 1 and thereby by integrated regulated layer 1 and other blockchains allowing trading venues such as MTFs or OTC also connecting to those settlement infrastructures. We talked about the cash leg, which is very crucial for settlement, obviously. What is still missing that we can actually scale that at full speed?
Yeah, I said in the beginning, I mean, these two parts, it's being worked on this year. And I think we will make very good progress on it. And the last missing piece, eligibility criteria, to kind of update them to the point where digital assets living on DLT become also first-class citizen and having the same rights like their counterparts in a traditional environment. Because from the financial instrument perspective, they are same. The big difference is on which ledger type they're existing, and of course, if they exist on DLT, then you benefit from bringing different stakeholders end to end onto the same ledger. But from the financial instrument perspective, a bond on a paper or a bond at a central security depository or a bond on DLT, it is the same financial instrument, and then it should have also the same rights, right? So, and that's something that will take some time because a lot of frameworks need to be adapted. So in Appia context, ECB is working on this already, and so they have introduced. It sounds a little bit like a paradox because you need to kind of switch a digital asset back to a traditional asset in order to kind of get it eligible for liquidity and collateral management at ECB. But that's just the first step. And the next step is like to say, okay, well, if you have an asset that is running under some, let's say, national or European license, then it could also get eligible. And then step by step, I think we'll reach this state, but I'm expecting this to take 2 to 3 years still. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally likely going to take a couple of years till we are there. So I think it's best to tackle that when working together, as you said, as an industry. We managed to go there much quicker than otherwise. Maybe as a last question, if someone is listening, working at a large financial institution, what would you recommend as a first step for an institution to take in case they are not yet fully into the DLT space?
Yeah, well, there is, I mean, the energy level, how much energy is invested into DLT space and digital assets, so it has increased enormously across the last 10 years. Yeah, and there is a lot of education that took place already. There is there are a lot of solutions that work already, and not just in the sense of packaging a little bit of technology and then throwing over the fence and then saying, okay, this will change the world, but in the sense of it gets more and more integrated. Yeah, so the integration level is increasing. Yeah, and basically, if somebody did not touch, let's say, this area yet, yeah, there are a lot of opportunities to go over the verge and simply try it out or participate in real value transactions. Yeah, so the verge has been really lowered to the let's say point where also typical, let's say, mainstream profiles can also go over the verge and start participating in this ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Ivica. It was very great talking about all those topics, and I'm very excited to see what's ahead of us. So thank you for being part of the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
This was Inside Digital Assets, a joint project by BX Digital and Seturion. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our podcast and feel free to share with others.